everyone, Joe here from ActionX. Welcome to What's in the Do, where is our show where we review things in the world of television. Most times now we are reviewing shows on an episode-by-episode basis, with new episodes coming out weekly for currently on-air shows. However, sometimes we like to go a little bit back, talk about whole season in full, in some regards, a full spoiler-filled review, kind of going really deep into the context of it, and just kind of giving my full definitive version of a review on it. And that's kind of what we're doing today. We are here today discussing DC Stargirl Season 2. It's been a while since I've been into the Stargirls universe. Kind of made it like an annual thing because, she's kind of, representing the Stars and Stripes, 4th of July theme. So this is about to fall in a second. I've been trying to fix this piece for months. It's going to fall, but yeah, so if you do like just letting you know. But yeah, no, I reviewed Stargirl live when it was airing back in 2020, which is kind of crazy. We're approaching, if not, we are about to hit the 5-year anniversary of the show even premiering in general. This came out during the pandemic, which, again, saying that's just so long ago, like, Jesus Christ. But we reviewed Season 1 definitively last year, and now this year we're doing Season 2. So it's been crazy to kind of, been a whole year away from this little Earth that the DC TV has cultivated. And when I was here last time, from what I can recall, I think Season 1 was a really fantastic season. I think of all the shows they made in that time period, because for a brief history lesson, Stargirl alongside Doom Patrol, Titans, Swamp Thing, Harley Quinn were being developed for a specific DC universe, not the current DCU, the previous iteration, the actual streaming app, to be one of those launch lineup, giving like very nuanced characters from the DC universe kind of their own platform, their own, opportunity to really grow. But things happen, and Stargirl got moved to becoming a CW original, which is where this season comes into place. But when Season 1 came out, that was very much a season that I was like, damn. I don't think it was like absolutely one of the best DC TV seasons out there, but it's one of them. It's high up there in my regard with Season 1. And, the amount of TLC, the amount of, I think I'll still give it to Superman and Lois, just as a little aside. If I'm really talking about something that was trying to look more cinematic on a week-to-week schedule, I think Stargirl did its absolute best with its CG budget. And it kind of, obviously VFX shouldn't be helping out the premise of the season, but sometimes, like the opportunities to really kind of flesh out a comic book world on the small screen, any little bit helps, and I use the phrase that the Superman Lois showrunner did when the show premiered, like, you're competing with all of these other shows on the television space, especially on streamers, which they're allowed to go a little bit more higher up on the VFX budget, so you kind of have the opportunity to tell a much grander story than to comparison when we were like even on the like 10 years ago, by the time when you had Smallville and Arrow and even The Flash, were like we're getting a little bit more flexible in how much you could do, but it was still very much restricted. And that's kind of where Stargirl was kind of, shining in, no pun intended, where that they really utilized everything to its possibility at the time for that first season. Because, again, they kind of had like not a limited budget, but more like kind of, like, we're going to go a little bit more with the season. We're going to do a little bit more with the show. We're going to go a little bit extra with this one. And I always said that as long as the quality of the story and the characters are there, I don't really care how the show looks like. I really don't. And, and all that kind of got tested when I was giving that original Season 2 predictions almost 5 years ago, where I was aware that, yeah, CW is going to obviously cut the budget. You look at Supergirl when it went from CBS to CW, you saw the change. So I was 100% expecting that with Stargirl. But honestly, now to get into it, like, I'll give a very brief spoiler-free review for you, if you don't want to get into the super details of what makes the show work. I think this was a great season. I think this was a great follow-up to Season 1. I don't quite think it hits some of the highs of Season 1. It comes back down to too much expansion. And I think there were some moments I thought that was very much needed to kind of flesh out the world. And however, it just kind of has that it's a double-edged sword, where like introducing a lot of new characters, not like a lot per se, but like giving more characters more time to shine. It could really like either like they don't get too much or they get too little, or it's just maybe it wasn't necessary. Some stuff didn't feel fleshed out, so to speak. obviously I completely forgot what happens to season 3, so I can't really, get into that. But when it comes to season 1, there was a nice natural flow into like how episode 1 led to episode 13. I'm not saying that doesn't happen here, but there were a couple things where like we kind of had to make little speed bumps that like it all made sense for the longevity of the story. It all made sense to where we need to go. It kind of informed the plot along. But it was missing like, and that's the problem when you have these sort of like, you know specific tight shows. Is like you can have a really great first season or a fantastic first season, but it's very difficult to do the follow up. And I think they did the absolute best what they were able to do with the characters without blowing their load too much. I think less is more, and which is like I said, like they did more, but they also did less because again budgeting and just how do they need to really kind of flesh out the story that they were trying to tell this season. And in reality, I think they did the best they could. And, I think this is a great follow-up, just not a better season, if that makes sense, And I will behold them to that when we get that more deeper into it, that it is felt the budget cut. It is very much felt. It doesn't really like impact the story. It doesn't. They do very unique, creative things to kind of work around that. Even using very vintage, let's just call it, effects to kind of like make it feel like a much more bigger story, even if they don't have like all the tools and bells that they used to have from the first season. And honestly, sometimes creatively wise, when you're pushed into a corner financially, sometimes the best ideas can come from it. Because, like, okay, we can't do this, obviously, but we can do this. And it's going to have almost, if not a better impact, if we had done it this way. So, with that being said, yeah, Stargirl, I think it's a great, season 2 is a great follow-up to the first season. It will just not reach that high that season 1 gave me. It did not. It took me a little bit of time to get the ball rolling on this, but by the time we reached that second half, that's kind of when like things started to really pick up, so to speak, on that. But before I go any forward to the full spoiler-filled review, just keep in mind you can stream Stargirl, the entire series, especially season 2, only on Max, soon to be rebranded once more to HBO Max, which I'm just like, I'm not even gonna get into that, but just like it was, oh, man, damn, like I don't know, I really don't know, but yeah. Anyway, so. Check it out there. You can also buy it in home media. It's available on DVD if you want a physical media collector, so you can watch it. That's how I watched it. I just literally canceled my Max subscription because Last of Us Season 2 just wrapped up, and I kind of watched everything I need to do on that platform. So for me, I kind of ran out of stuff, and I realized, oh shit, I have to watch part of my French Season 2 soon. So I'm like, I completely forgot about it. So I was like, oh, that's just wonderful. That's just great. I guess I have no choice but to I have to buy the DVD, and it was like the last one I was missing for the Stargirl trilogy of seasons. So I'm like, I guess I'll get it at some point. So I'm glad I did. And then I have that little thing kind of fully set up. I'm very happy about that. But again, let's get down to it. So when we pick up with season 2, it takes place about six months after the events of season 1. 7 technically, if you want to count like where the actual story ended, but like the real story ended by Christmas. So we're entering summer territory, which honestly is, again, for me, just frankly, I'm in a 90-degree weather day when I'm recording this. It is very hot. I put my AC on full blast because for audio, I turn off my AC. So it's going to be a scorcher here towards the end. So I'm not gonna speed for the review, but I'm just letting you know that I can definitely feel the summer feelings that this season was trying to implement, and it's been quite boring for the new JSA. Obviously they took care of the ISA. It was a very jam-packed couple weeks when they were doing that. Now they kind of, are mostly on patrol mode. Courtney very much is trying to stay vigilant in the small town of Blue Valley once more, while Pat is just trying to advise her, hey, look, being a superhero can be great, but, in specific natures like this, where, like, you're still a kid, you're still growing up, you still have an opportunity to kind of, still be yourself, take it, because you never know when the next, world-ending threat, if not another threat's going to come by. And, again, in this original JSA world, they took care of most of the ISA. Some are dead, some are arrested, some are chickens and ran away. There's not really much else that they can focus on. But sadly, Courtney still got that, got the hero complexity in her. She still very much, still wants to still be able to, like, keep saving the world. Like, obviously when you come from a big, like, we destroyed a satellite, we beat some bad guys, like, obviously the high's still there. You just want to kind of keep exploring that. You kind of want to keep being able to still have that feeling each and every day. And, obviously when you're in a small town in the middle of the United States, it's like, it's not like every day someone's going to come in and, like, again, it's one of those towns where, like, crime's not that hard. It's not that plausible. You have a police official down there, but it's a very small town. It's not really needed to, like, take care of, like, these sort of things, especially when you have 4 superheroes roaming around. Like, it's not really necessary. And, Courtney has to kind of, accept that, mind you, and then, they just enjoy these times of pieces, because, like, peace is, very much fleeting in our own times. But and that's kind of how, like, another threat from the past kind of comes back into play, because when we ended season 1, Cindy Berman found the Black Diamond, which presents a very sinister power that, after all this time, she's kind of returned, which honestly doesn't really make sense, to be honest with you. There really is no clarification to what she did away, whether she just wanted to have a free vacation before coming back, or just to give a little bit of time and a break. I don't know, the timetables here don't really work out, but, like, to have the feel of, like, the subtitle, this is DC Stargirl, Summer School, to kind of, like, as a graphic novel, season 1 was just DC Stargirl. This is Summer School. Next year will be Frenemies, and I was disappointed we didn't get to see more than that. But but they have to tangle eventually once summer eventually begins, and it's not quite as clear cut as everyone was expecting. Summer School happens, a new generation of the ISA pumps around, and then the true threat of Eclipso appears, and obviously. Things are gonna go to crap, and things are gonna go supremely dark. No pun intended. Again, like with the villains' nature this season, as they have to really deal with someone that's beyond their comprehension, and get to know a little bit more about the OG JSA, which was a really nice touch. But we'll get more about them when it comes to the pros and cons of that in a second. So. Honestly, from a story perspective, again, like, what last year was like, new JSA versus old ISA, as well as, kind of finding the purpose within yourself, your own value of sorts. And now this season's kind of, wriggling around, like, what is really next? What is the next thing? And that's kind of like, the theme, like, what is next? What is the next purpose I have? Because, sometimes you do the big prophecy thing, the big destination, the big mission is complete. But what happens after that? No one ever, honestly talks about that. Sometimes people lament over it. They kind of just keep thinking about, like, oh, I can't wait till, like, the next thing happens, and then that can be important again. Or, like, on the opposite end, where, like, they're glad it's over and they're able to, like, kind of move on from it. It's kind of like, this cast of characters is stuck in the middle, where, like, some of them are, like, kind of eager to, like, kind of move on, to kind of, like, really kind of get going, and some of them just can't really get out of the past, and they're kind of stuck there, and they're really just trying to figure out, is there a way forward? What is the way forward? Or is it just more of the same? It's kind of like, that big question mark. So I like that for all that, for all the original characters from the first season, and then going into season 2, it's they're in the new character. They still carry that same aura with them, where, like, they're still trying to figure out what's next between them, because, even if they weren't there for season 1, they were still impacted by the events of their passes, their unique, specific passes, and kind of how that kind of informs the overall story for season 2. So I really much appreciate that. But like I said before, the advantage what season 1 had was, like, again, it was like assembling the new JSA, getting to know these new heroes, and then kind of getting a little bit more backstory of, like, about the old ISA specifically, and really knowing who are they fighting. This year's a little bit more different, because, like I said, there's more heroes than villains this time around. Eclipso being, I guess, is the primary antagonist, but we have a little other minor threats stood around, like the new ISA, which, we'll get to them in a moment, but just to say point, like, the way they frame it, obviously, we're still having some season 1 leftovers of, like, following back up on certain things, as well as, obviously, delving deep into, like, the new aspects of season 2, such as introducing Shade, a new Green Lantern, and obviously Eclipse himself. So there's a lot on the table for them to do. So like I said before before the jump, they really have a good way of, like, navigating through the season. Like, even when they take these little side steps into, like, we're not really directly focusing on season 2, but we are focusing on, like, the characters. I think that was an advantage, because I love when they talk about the characters. I love even, like, the minor character. It's nice to get them a moment, kind of remind, the cat. And that's what I really like when you have, like, a real story, because little sidestep is that season 2 was part of a larger 6-season plan. Stargirl was supposed to be a 6-season show, and they were already at, this was we were still in the beginning, let alone, like, we were kind of wrapping up the beginning in a sense. So certain episodes, I noticed that, again, with context of season 3 and where they were supposed to go, they really, they kept things kind of moving in the background so that, it kind of made sense when we get those moments in season 3 and what could have been afterwards. Like, it made sense, like, okay, there was a natural setup instead of being introduced kind of last minute here. Because, again, even during season 1, there was the cue of, like, there was more successors to come. We obviously had, with the JSA, the original, a Green Lantern. They had a Flash. They had a Thunderbolt, and we weren't able to really get to all of this because, again, like, you don't want to overbloat the story. And here I was very thankful they kind of withheld themselves. That season 2 could have literally been like, hey, Stargirl is bored, let's go recruit more JSA members so we could add this cast. No, they smartly picked what they needed to do for this specific story, for this specific season, and again, honestly, every aspect of them worked out very well. It's just like, again, like, it's a little clunky at some points, because, again, it takes a while to really get the feel going. I feel like even by the time that that Eclipso comes into play, even like an episode after that is when kind of like, now we're getting somewhere interesting. Now we're getting to like the good stuff. Where, like, no offense at the beginning, because, again, we're just setting up the motions there. But like I said, it was really necessary to that. But going to like the actual characters for a second. When it comes to the villains, we'll start with the big bad Eclipso. I'm saving the new ISA for a bit. Eclipso as a villain, again, forgetting context of what the season 3 villain was compared to Icicle and the ISA. Yeah, it's generic evil villain taking over the world, mind thing. It's nothing really, nothing really much. I know the actor for him played Boomerang and Captain Boomerang in Arrow before pre-Crisis. So I know he has the chops, and it was good for him to like really kind of flesh deeper into like a really like bigger Fred villain. And I think he did a really good job at the voice and the performance. And I will say this suit, the costume, despite it looking a little bit like it was a combination between a Green Goblin and a Mr. Ivan Ooze from the Mighty Morphin Power Ranger movie. That's kind of like a formation of that. But honestly, the face structure, my God, if they just painted green and kept those purple things, literally, that would be a perfect comic book adaptation for Green Goblin. So I'm like, it can be done. It can be done. So I do hope if the Holland movies ever get to that point again with a proper Green Goblin for his universe, I really hope they do something like that. But besides that, now he's just, evil because he's formed from darkness, so he has the inclination to just kind of put everything into darkness. There really isn't much more grander deviation from his certain mission. The only other thing I can mention from the side point of view is that that I do like they tease this playfulness from him, acting like a small child as well as, to save a little bit of money by not putting on the costume so many times, and withholding those moments to so we can have a really big impact with those. It works for me at certain intervals. Sometimes it would have been cooler to get the full costume, but sometimes it is more like kind of creepy to have that little kid there. Why they picked him, I don't know. I guess it's just kind of like, lower your guard or something. I'm not totally 100% certain about that, but yeah, but that was the only really unique thing about him. He had a couple cool fight scenes, towards the end. Even in that, I'm pretty sure that suit kind of weighed a ton and a half because it doesn't look like some of those very comfortable, so to speak. So I'll give the actor credit for wearing that, but I don't think we get too much of Eclipso though, in terms of like the actual character himself. It's very much the kid pandering and then him popping up when he needs to be, and it really comes to the forefront. But yeah, no, he was not a villain that I was very much like really scared by. I get what he was doing, but it wasn't something that was like, oh, this is just evil villain cookie cutter. Not really much more to say. Then moving into Shade, which Shade is a very unique character. 'Cause I think Shade has ended up being my favorite character in Stargirl as a show. I don't know if it's his voice, his charisma, I don't know. But he never sold me as a villain. He does have his moments where he can sound like, don't fuck with me energy. But at the same time, he just is a simplistic man that just loves his tea and kind of wants to be left alone, kind of left to his own instruments. He's kind of like that weird uncle figure that you kind of need a couple of days to like really get to before you can actually really vibe with the man. And that's kind of the vibe I get from him because, like, you know, again, like, Courtney is just trying to seek out any sort of villain she can to give her and the team purpose, to give her, like, the chance to be the leader, a true leader again, fighting someone. And by the time he comes to play, like, it's not necessarily someone that, like, even she, like, really fearful towards certain points. Because, like, after he debuts, like, after that, he's kind of, like, you know, just, like, chilling. Like, not even chilling like a villain. He's just chilling around, like, you know, so to speak. And once again, like, you know, tying another villain from the ISA to Barbara was, like, kind of odd. You know, I'm not going to lie to you. Icicle had a crush on her, and now Shade's kind of, like, got this father, like, this fathership over. It's like, I don't know what's going on. I really don't. If it is just, like, trying to give Barbara some more scenes or whatever, I really don't know, to be honest with you. I really don't. We'll talk more about that in her character segment. But yeah, no, it was just, like, one of those weird things that, like, I noticed during my watch. But I really do like Shade as a character. Once he kind of, like, ditched the villain ensemble, kind of did him. Sure, he can, like, there was the moment where, like, he tricked Courtney and Pat to go recover the Black Diamond and reforge it so that he can get his powers back, but saying, like, it's a capture device for Eclipso, so if we can't really beat him, you guys can capture him again. So, that being the case, now, he still has his own nefarious purpose, but it seemed like, you know, it's the Dragon Ball Z effect where, like, villains come to Earth, and then they kind of get swayed by Earth's and their people and their food sometimes, so they kind of become a good... So it's kind of got that similar energy by the end of Season 2, where, like, Shade's kind of become this, like, foreign uncle to them, where, like, he's not necessarily their best friends, but hey, he's going to stick around, and, you know, I really do like the character from a performance base, so I kudos to the actor for the way he performed them. Then moving into the new ISA with Cindy and getting her original plan. Like, I remember I was, like, teasing at the end of and when I was doing my Season 2 predictions, I would have loved a reverse where, like, it would have been the new JSA versus the new ISA. And we got shades of that, and we never really got to see the full potential, especially where Season 3 headed. There really wasn't that, because obviously there wasn't really that much other people they could play at. You know, Cindy being Dragon King's daughter. Then you had the Crocs' daughter, Artemis, as one, and then the violinist's son as well as a possibility. And then we had Icicle in the wings. Like, Cindy's plan, like, it required a couple extra steps that wasn't really necessary. Like, I understand, like, she probably took those 6 months away in hindsight to kind of, you know, talk to Eclipso, like, what is the master plan? But you don't really need 6 months to determine, oh yeah, I'm just going to recruit these two, at least 2 or 3 of the kids from the bad group last time, recruit them to my bad group, and then once Courtney's, like, down enough, I'll release you. Like, I don't know, that plan could have literally just been Cindy, and she didn't really need the Black Diamond. I guess that was just her insurance, like, in case she fails, like, okay, boom, I release this dark entity back into the world. I don't know, to be honest with you. I really don't know. Because by the time you get to those new ISA moments, there really isn't the same vibe. And I know that wasn't probably the purpose of, you know, doing that. But it's just like, you know, I guess my minor expectations kind of, like, you know, got the better of me. Not seeing them kind of have more of a kinship. You know, it was just Cindy kind of targeting them when they were down on life and kind of using them besides Cameron, which... Cameron, for a way, you know, he always shows up to be kind of Courtney's love interest from afar, and just kind of a reminder, like, he very much serves a bit of the Harry Osborn aspect of Spider-Man 2, where, like, he's not really super integral to the plot, he's kind of doing his own thing, but then we're teeing him up, like, oh, next time now, he's gonna be a problem, and I'm just, like, literally, by the time we end Season 2 with his final scene with his grandparents, that was definitely giving me, like, oh yeah, like, this is his Green Goblin moment. He's gonna be the next Icicle, and, you know, but we don't get that in this season. We don't. It's just an aside there. But yeah, so I think from the villain perspective, yeah, it wasn't quite the strongest force this year in terms of performance and, like, gravitation towards us as the viewers. I don't think so. I think they were just what we needed for the story, so our heroes kind of can get that understanding of, you know, of where we kind of need to go there, and that kind of leads us to the point with the. With our cast, like our primary heroes, starting with the new JSA. Beth, again, you know, we talked about Beth a lot last year. She was very much not anyone's first choice to be a superhero, let alone be part of a friend group. But it kind of worked in a way, kind of like, you know, like, it's that person you never assume you would be your friend, but once you kind of realize how reliable they are and how much they actually care is kind of when they actually start to really fit in with the group. Not in, like, the best way possible, sadly, but it does work. And this year, kind of, you know, her feeling even more isolated, even with everything going on. And, you know, I feel like people don't really understand that. You can still feel isolated no matter how much you spend time with people. You know, there is this season we delve into like her parents actually thinking about getting a divorce and her losing her AI companion from last year, Chuck, and you know obviously her loneliness, and that kind of connects her to one of the season's foils, which is the returning original Dr. Midnight, which was who he was not killed in the battle 10 years ago, who's actually just sent over to the Shadow Realm by Shade, because that was another thing I liked about Shade, where like Shade never was inherently evil. He just had all this dark energy, but in him, but he never really like valued the plans of the ISA. He was just kind of kind of just there for the ride, so to speak. So it kind of made sense on that. And you know, once we really get to the Eclipso side of the season, her battling her own demons, with Eclipso kind of manifesting them with her insecurities, her being in a way abandoned, especially like when you go to that second half where Miles spoiled for Yolanda and Rick, like Eclipso managed to get rid of them from like a motivation standpoint, leaving only Courtney and Beth, and largely Courtney's going to be the more one actively taking charge on certain missions, so Beth is kind of just there waiting, and not to say that's a bad thing, but still very much like she's very much kind of, she has these shades of loneliness, and in those scenes we had last season, what she had with Chuck not being there anymore, it kind of like really kind of weighs her down a little bit, and just like on her life in general, and it does very much suck to see. It really does. She wants to still be that same attentive, lovable person that we do enjoy to see, if not a little bit too much but it's still enough to kind of get behind the character and really understand what she's feeling with. And I think that was very noted of her, to still give her something to do, despite being, I guess, the one on the team that doesn't really have any sort of powers or a weapon that she can use, so to speak. Then moving into Rick, where our man, last season again, he got his comeuppance. He got what he wanted by taking down Grundy, but kind of having left this little piece of shred of humanity towards him by not killing him, but still kind of maintaining the vibe. He killed Grundy and that's it. But no, he's kind of been like a caregiver to Grundy in a very weird way, I guess. Like, in a way, he wanted to stop the cycle of violence. Like, he could have easily killed Grundy at the end of last season, but considering the fact that, hey, Grundy's still kind of a human. He's just kind of like, malformed and deformed to the point like he doesn't look like it, but very much he still cares about him, and he still wants him to still thrive, and especially, I'm just curious how the hell that Rick could be able to afford all the food he needed to kind of, take care of Grundy. Even I know Grundy eventually, like, snuck off to certain things to kind of, steal food and nourishments for his own. But the fact that, like, Rick was buying all this food with what money? I mean, I'm not sure if his parents left him an inheritance or something. I really don't know. They didn't really seem like the type to, like, really have a lot of money at hand. But Rick this year is just mainly focused on, like, keeping his friends safe, and then obviously, still going around with Courtney's, shebangs of, like, still trying to be a JSA, still trying to be active. Even when, by the time things kind of get set up, we're like, when we get to the middle portion before we head to the halfway mark, he very much is just the muscle, being there, reacting, still dealing with his, like, faults with Grundy. The fact that, wasn't the right decision to leave him alive and kind of, just not kill him. Then we'll get to the second half where, like, again, Calypso gets into his head, trying to trick him that Grundy is still a monster. He made a big choice, a bad choice to leave him alive, all being part of a plan for just Rick to beat up his uncle so he can get arrested and sidelined. It was very creative and, like, again, a weird step, because, again, that was part of Eclipso's plan to kind of get Yolanda and Rick to kind of be their heroes no more moments because of something he's kind of orchestrated from the background. And it really does suck from that perspective for Rick, because, again, it seemed like Rick was on the straight and narrow. He had some moments in the beginning of the season where, like, he was kind of misinterpreted. Like, he's still kind of like, the loner, the bully to an extent. But he is trying to change. He is trying to be a better version of himself, to honor his parents, to be a good team member to his friends, and, and all that sort. And, him having these sidesteps kind of really kind of put into question on his whole development of his whole life. Is everything I've been doing even mattering at the end of the day? If people are still viewing me as kind of like this angry level kid, is that really what people still view me as? Then going to Yolanda, where it's kind of in a similar regard, where, she, her decisions at the end of last season with her killing Brainwave and inadvertently being part of Henry Jr.'s death, that still weighs on her heavily in the last 6 months. And again, it's similar to Beth, where like there's a sense of loneliness where since season 1, season 2, yeah, she has formed much more of a better connection with Courtney. They see each other as best friends, and like the people they can really count on. And when we when we get to that, when we kind of see like how lonely she is, and I have to be reminded, yes, when we see her in season 1, her family has basically disowned her, and even though she's found this new friend family, she's found this new purpose, even for the last 6-7 months of being with them, the whole trauma of like she never meant to kill Brainwave, but she had to save the world, and before he could enslave them, but still taking a life, still being responsible, like, hey, this person's not on this earth because of me. I killed them. How is that going to weigh on her psyche? How is that going to weigh on her subconscious? And again, Calypso, eventually, by the time he kind of gets aware of things, and he kind of knew that, he kind of uses that to his advantage of, like, kind of reminding her, like, you are a murderer. You killed this person. No matter what way you say about it, you will always be classified as a murderer. Example being No Way Home, where, like, when they accused Spider-Man for killing Mysterio. Mysterio didn't die from Spider-Man's hand. He just died from the random gunfire from a drone, but yet people will still view him as a murderer. It's like the public perspective, the public, what they think of you. And, even though, like, no one probably knew the full details of it, she knows. And, that's all that is kind of weighing her down. Like, is this affecting her own progress, her own development of trying to be a better person? Is this all affecting her? And then by the time we get to that moment later on where she has her own Wildcat No More moment, and even towards the end, well, like, by the time we kind of bring her back into the JSA fully, it wasn't exactly the smoothest shit. We just kind of needed her back. Obviously, it was like a couple fight scenes, a conversation with Cindy, which is superbly ironic for her to kind of fully come back. It was a bit weird how that performance went, but it was very much like, it was kind of necessary to like kind of keep the story going. So besides that, just a minor hiccup still, they were able to still kind of deliver on her character as well. Then going to the Dugan Whitmores, because I completely forgot. Yeah, they didn't take Dugan's name, Pat's name. They just kind of kept going with the hyphenated name on that front. But damn, I forgot Courtney's brother, Pat's son's name. I completely forgot, and I'm trying to purposely do this slow pandering to see if I can remember, but I cannot. Yeah, I really did forget. I forgot. I apologize. But so yeah, him being also exposed to the whole JSA truth from last season 2, obviously having a bit of more like sideline last season. Now him kind of witnessing all this, the super heroics, the striped suit, and everything. He's kind of more inspired this year to like kind of trying to be a part of it, trying to be that next Stripe, trying to be part of the team, trying to have that purpose. And obviously, Pat's going to be defensive dad mode, and that kind of goes into to the way of his character. Last season with him really trying to establish his father-daughter relationship with Courtney. This year, he kind of has to focus a little bit more about his own son because, again, like being a superhero is very dangerous. Being out there on the front lines can be dangerous. There are very dangerous villains with all sorts of superpowers, and again, he doesn't have any. So all he can do right now is just protect his son from it, just keep him away from like the battles so that he has the better chance of surviving. But of course, obviously, he just wants to feel valuable. He wants to feel purposeful because everyone else seems to have a role to play, and except for him. So it does suck for him, and especially by the time he briefly gets the Thunderbolt pen and almost became that successor. Even he realized maybe what I'm doing is not entirely what I'm expected to be. Maybe I need to go a different path to really figure out what is my place here, what is my purpose here, what can I really do to help them out, because it didn't seem like he really was jiving to like the direction he was going to. He kind of wants to still follow in his dad's footsteps. But yeah, there was a moment where like the Thunderbolt have a conversation with Pat about his son, and they talk about it. We're like, yeah, the only reason why I was summoned by him, why I went to him specifically, is because I go to lonely people. I go to people. It's kind of like a Very Odd Parents. They go to people that really need it, that kind of really need that extra assistance. And Pat kind of having that dad moment, like, oh shit, if that's how he's feeling, and I'm his dad, I'm not doing a good job of being a parent. And it is a blow to him. It really does. All he wants to do is I think his name is Mike. I just remember now. To keep Mike safe and to allow him to kind of still thrive and still have like be the only one on the family that can still have a normal-ish life, but certain things kind of prevent that from actually happening, so to speak. So then we go over to Barbara, which, like I said, from Shade's portion, I do believe they were trying to find her way, and it was kind of weird. Like, she's still working at the American Dream this year, except now it's unclear whether or not she began promoted to Icicle's former role, or that she just kind of maintained her role. It wasn't really clear by that, considering just how much of her back and forth she was able to have. Yeah, that was a little weird on that front, but however, by the time we get over to, just her being more of a support staff this year, being more of an emotional, like, support crux for Pat, trying to, like, navigate, helping him, like, still kind of, be a father and a mentor to Courtney, as well as her just being, now being in the loop. Obviously, Pat's always been, like, trying to tell Barbara everything first, trying to make sure she's included in the conversations so she knows ahead of time, but, like, she had a little bit to deal with this season, especially keeping Pat's secrets away from Courtney kind of really did have an impact on her and her own daughter, just trying to, like, keep it all in. This is one of the challenges of being a parent. Like, what can you tell your child? What can you not? Even in this certain situation where, like, your daughter should know this information, but is it really necessary to her? Because you're not thinking of it from a super heroic perspective, but you're thinking about it just like a parental thing. And so I get Barbara on that, and, it was just kind of weird, the whole Shade thing. It really was. Like, just how much she gravitates towards, like, these men, and, like, just, like, that they kind of need her in a way. It's a little weird. Not going to lie to you. Not going to lie to you. And Pat, I think Pat just kind of improves this season with his character. Still maintaining that same core, that same comedic timing, just trying to be the mentor. Like, again, I'm pretty sure for him, he was not the first choice to be the mentor to these kids, but he is trying his best. Now that he's fully accepted his role as that, he may never be the superhero that Starman was, or even now Stargirl is. Like, he could still maintain his presence, like, really, like, helping out this team, kind of really guiding things about, and it kind of really helps out this season where, like, we get to see more of of his backstory with the JSA. We didn't get too much of that in season 1, but here we do, with the flashback, getting more about Eclipso from the original JSA perspective, which is kind of a little bit thing I could do to, like, segue into that, where, like, when we get to those flashbacks, I'm just going to be completely honest with you. I know 100% this was a budget-saving measure, but the fact that they kept that Pat was always looked like that, even though that footage was, like, from almost 20 years ago, like, that's crazy. For me, that's crazy, because, again, I timelines, Schmeinlines, I understand that, but, like, the fact that he always looked the same. I recently just watched Suits LA, and I understood, like, there was a flashback component to that show where, like, okay, Stephen Amell could play his character 10 years ago, wouldn't be that much of a change. But the fact that they picked 20 years ago, 20 years, and when they got to that point, they just gave them bad wigs and more makeup. I'm just like, no, just recast by a certain point, just to make it make sense, because it's too jarring of an effect. So, but either way, no. So, but just seeing him having those moments with Starman, with Joel McHale making more of an appearance this year, to kind of flesh out the JSA storyline, even spending more time with the JSA as they deal with the Eclipso crisis, because it's not just the Eclipso as the villain that's the problem with them. It's also the fact that the nature of how they can beat them kind of goes against their morals. It kind of goes back to that. The whole Man of Steel debacle, like, should Superman kill? Should superheroes kill their bad guys? Sure, in a way, it kind of makes it easier so they never come back and try again, but the hopefulness is that, they are supposed to be morally better than them by not exploiting to that possibility to end them once and for all, whether just to beat them, lock them up, and hope to God that they never come out to play again. That's all they can hope for. But with the Eclipso stuff, it really kind of put them into perspective of, like, is that a line we can cross? Is that a line that we should do? And by the time they do cross it, and they kind of do accept it, it brings more weight to why they broke them in the first place, to why, like, this team of superheroes that, like, are treated like a family. How come they couldn't defeat the ISA? Obviously, I didn't really ask that question when we were watching season 1, but this 100% made the difference. Is, you watch even, like, Infinity War at the time, where, like, heroes were divided. They were worked better together. They were not together, and they lost. So morally, I could see them, like, not having talked for years, not having battled for years, and just suddenly being thrown into a life or death battle. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised if, like, yeah, they met their maker by that point, because they just weren't working together as a team. They were just all independent, and that kind of was their downfall on that front. And also, just a quick aside for the JSA stuff. Like, look, I love John Wesley Shipp. I loved him from The Flash. I loved him from his own show. I completely understand bringing him back to like keep playing that Jay Garrick character. I completely get that in the larger scheme of the multiverse. And someone could say like, well, season 1 was filmed before Crisis, so they could just easily say, oh, that original actor that played him in season 1, he kind of got like remorphed into John Wesley Shipp after Crisis once Oliver rebooted the multiverse. That could have been their perspective, but considering the fact they came afterwards and everything, I'm not going to give them the full credibility to that. Like, look, I love John Wesley Shipp. I really, really do. It just, from a visuals perspective, you're still keeping the posters and everything. Like, it doesn't make sense because, like, yeah, he's using the Flash TV show suit for his scenes here in Stargirl, even though they're two completely separate Earths. And again, it gives more credence for, like, you know, all the CW watchers back then, because, like, you kind of still understand more about this character, because, again, he kind of is rooted in a very unique perspective that kind of goes across throughout every universe we've seen him in. So it was really not that hard to really get his personality and his beliefs down packed, but it was still very much that the core of, like, it just... This could have been an opportunity to bring in a new actor. It could have been like just or keep that same actor from the posters, from the picture lineup. But again, it is what it is on that front. I'm not gonna criticize too much on it, but still very much like, you know, weird decision there in a way. Just all I'm gonna say on that. And then finally to Courtney. Again, Courtney having to learn the next part of being a superhero, which is like kind of balance, trying to still maintain your core, maintain who you are as a person, and thriving in that. Because being a superhero is great. The responsibility, you know, being the leader, being this linchpin to everything. It's a very important role. But you got to make time for yourself. You really, really do. And Courtney being swallowed up by everything this season. Again, part of Eclipse's plan to get Courtney all riled out, get her only focused on the larger picture, not focusing on herself too much. It was noted, it was shown, and, you know, she, you know, it's kind of like the Woody effect from Toy Story, where, like, even, like, when things don't go your way, you kind of have this, like, you know, this little attitude for yourself, and you don't realize what you've done till it's too late. So Brett Bassinger really goes through all the emotions this season when it comes to the directions on that. Even, like, when they introduced the new Green Lantern, she kind of felt jealous of, like, oh, she's the new hotshot in town, cool. And then Pat having to remind her, yeah, you wanted this last year. You wanted more people for the JSA. That's what you wanted. And she's like, yeah, but on my term. Not like she just shows up out of nowhere, takes the Green Lantern ring, and all of a sudden everyone accepts her as such. But, you know, it takes a bit of time, you know, her having to, like, kind of, you know, realize what she lost, whether it was Yolanda and Rick leaving the team, or her going to the Shadow Realm, her learning all these things, her realizing not to take granted what you have, because at the end of the day, they could easily be taken away from you at some point. And she had to kind of go through that. It was difficult, you know, to kind of, you know, deal with all that. It's tough to be the leader sometimes. It's tough to see people having disagreements with you. It's tough for people to, like, be affected by a negative thing that doesn't really, you know, that doesn't really impact you directly, but it still impacts them. So it's really hard to balance all that. And that's something she kind of had to at least get the idea of the seasons, to have that balanced perspective, to have that balanced lifestyle. And, you know, that was going to actually make it easier for her down the road, but it wasn't something that she still realized till later on, which was very, very sad. But thankfully, you know, by the end of things, things worked out for the better, and, you know, in her direction. But very much so, it was something that she had to really navigate through. And at the end of the day, it did make her a stronger, more open-minded, more wiser leader, so to speak, about it. And now continue her progression to be the superhero that she's meant to be on that. But yeah, well, you know, with all that being said, you know, I think season 2 is great. I think it's a great season of television. The 13 episodes could have been condensed to 12 or 11. They could have cut a little bit more out. It kind of felt like they were trying to, like, really kind of stretch out those 13, since that was, like, the magic number. But honestly, you know, I think it was very much a character-driven thing with all the heroes, and I guess in a way the anti-heroes or the not-so-villains. I think everyone got a little bit of development there, which I think was it's really difficult to do when you have a big ensemble cast. Like, it's really hard to even focus on, like, your main hero, let alone the supporting cast and everything. But it worked out really well. It really, really did. And I think as a result, it just goes to show just how much the writing team cared, how much they really want the world to keep building and keep growing, and as well as, to have these characters grow as well, no matter what the pace may be. By the time we end season 2 and go into season 3, it leaves them in a much more stronger foothold to really kind of delve into that. But it really next time will test their morals more than likely, and more of them, of the who can you really trust type of mentality, which will be a very interesting thing to talk about next year. But in reality, they set that all up very nice and well for this one. As again, great thing when you're playing a bigger story. The bigger story all makes sense, but sometimes the smaller story, you kind of have to make those little bit of points of we're just filling the gaps here. We're trying to make it a little bit better, but it's not 100% perfect as a result. But with that being said, I think Stargirl Season 2 is worth the binge. If you got a free weekend coming up in your summer vacation, definitely is worth it. Same with Season 1. We'll talk about Season 3 next year. But yeah, no, I'll totally check it out on Max, or soon to be HBO Max if you want to. Buy it on DVD. Please support physical media, please. I beg of you. And yeah. That's my recommendation on it. Let me know down below. What did you think of the second season of DC Stargirl? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you like it? Let me know down below. I would love to have a conversation with you about it. But I believe that's going to do it for me today, everyone. So if you're unaware, this has been What's the Two from Action, giving my definitive review for DC Stargirl Season 2. If you want to see more of our Stargirl content, we actually have a whole playlist over here on ActionX. You can go watch all of our episode reviews. We done every episode has an individual review. We've done our spoiler-free reviews for all 3 seasons, and we have also our Season 1 definitive review also up for your viewing perspective. If you care about Stargirl specifically, we will return 1 year from now with our Season 3 review. I have no idea what the world's going to be. I'm not even getting into it. I'm going to make this a time capsule. I'll see you next year, being positive on that. But yeah, thank you so much for watching again. Please subscribe if you haven't yet. Like, favorite, share if you want to. Ring that bell and follow us on social media for more. But until we see each other again, thank you so much for watching. Please stay safe out there. Be good to each other. As always, peace out.